There is a legend that is told about a young soldier. This young soldier was serving in Napoleon's army, and he really didn't want to be there. He was kind of forced into serving. He was conscripted to be there. And eventually this young man decided to desert. So he left his post and he ran away. He wanted to return back home. But this young man who deserted the army did not get very far before he was arrested by other soldiers. And because desertion was such kind of a serious crime at this time, he was sentenced to the death penalty. He was sentenced to be put to death. So he was there in prison, and the young soldier's mother found out about this, and she wanted to try her best to try to save her son's life. So she went and eventually was able to find Napoleon as he was kind of out in the open once. And she went to Napoleon to beg for her son's life. She begged that Napoleon show her son mercy. And Napoleon responded to her, "Look, you know what your son has done. He has clearly done this. He has deserted the army. This is punishable by death. He does not deserve mercy." And the mother of this soldier responded to Napoleon, "I know he doesn't deserve mercy. Mercy, if it was true mercy, is not something that is deserved or something that is earned." The mother of this soldier is really on to something here. Mercy, which is really at the center of today's gospel, is not something that we earn. It's not something that we deserve. Mercy is something that is given as a gift. Furthermore, we see in this story the way that mercy, that this woman is seeking for mercy with her son, restores life. Likewise, the mercy that God gives us also brings us life. We heard in the gospel today this remarkable story about this woman who is brought towards Jesus. And in this interaction, the Jewish authorities want to try to entrap Jesus. They want to trick Jesus. They want to put him in a situation from which they think there is no escape. And along the way, they remove the dignity of this woman. So we see that these religious authorities bring a woman to Jesus and say, "Look, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. What do you do?" And they knew right well, as did Jesus, that in certain places in the law, Moses' law commanded that someone caught in adultery, both the man and the woman, would be stoned to death. Now, there is no evidence that this was actually done at Jesus' time, but they are kind of putting Jesus in that position. They're asking Jesus, by bringing this woman in front of him, to say, "Look, are you not going to follow the law of Moses or not?" So they're kind of testing him here. But more than this, they're actually putting him into a trap. Because at this time, under Roman law, someone couldn't just put to death someone like this. Jesus and the other Jewish people actually had no authority to sentence someone to death. So this is kind of what you would call a classic double bind. It seems that Jesus has no real way to escape. On the one hand, if he says that this woman should not be put to death, it might seem that he is going against the law of Moses, and therefore the religious authorities could criticize him. On the other hand, if he does take this drastic measure to say, "Look, we know the law of Moses, we know she must be put to death," then Jesus will get in trouble with the Roman authorities. So they're trying to trick Jesus. It's clear that they don't really care about justice. They don't really care about anything like that. And we can see this because they just brought the woman there. And in fact, the woman they have dehumanized. They never really even talk to her. They just call her an adulteress, a sinner. She is kind of used by them. She's instrumentalized. She's used as a pawn in their attempt to trap Jesus, which makes it just such a terrible thing to do. So we see then in the gospel that Jesus is put in this trap. Jesus finds an incredible way to both escape from this trap that he has put in and teach all around him an incredible lesson about mercy. So Jesus does this in a couple steps. The first thing that he does is he exposes the hypocrisy of the people. And he says to them, "Let you among you, who is without sin, cast the first stone." So Jesus is not trying to contradict Moses here, but he is trying to teach a lesson about mercy. We all, each of us, are sinners. We all are in need of God's mercy. We all are in need of God's forgiveness. For this reason, we need to extend this mercy and forgiveness to others. It seems that the elderly, they're the ones who leave first, leave because they understand the wisdom of this. They understand that Jesus is correct. Jesus teaches then that we're all sinners in need of mercy. This woman then, too, deserves mercy. And it's fascinating to see in this gospel that Jesus finally addresses the woman. If you pay close attention to the gospel, everybody is ignoring her. They are again using her as a pawn to try to entrap Jesus. But it is finally then when Jesus is face to face with the woman that he humanizes her. He addresses her directly. He gives her the opportunity to say, look, all her accusers have fled away. And Jesus there then offers her mercy. Jesus offers her forgiveness. He does not punish her, and he offers her a better future. He encourages her to go and to sin no more. In offering this woman mercy then, Jesus quite literally restores her life. Whereas others wanted to put her to death because of what she had done, Jesus shows her mercy and forgiveness. He restores really her humanity. It's only Jesus in the gospel who treats her like a real person, and he restores her and he gives her the possibilities for a better future. You've probably heard many times that expression, and it goes like this, that Jesus or God knows our sins but calls us by our name, whereas the devil or Satan knows our name but calls us by our sins. And this is oftentimes told in response to this gospel story. Jesus' way is to know the person. He sees this woman, he sees her suffering, and he shows her mercy. He doesn't focus on her sins. The Jewish authorities here are acting in that other way, the way that the devil acts, ultimately ignoring her and her humanity and focusing just on her sins. This gospel, of course, is an encouragement for us to follow that mode of Jesus, to be merciful as Jesus Christ is merciful. We can at times fall into the other trap. We can focus on people and call them by their sins and ignore their name, ignore their humanity. And we can do these in different ways, and maybe during Lent, Christ is inviting us to reflect on the ways we do this, the way maybe we single out the sins of other people. We can do this in various ways. We all can at times kind of give in to that sin of gossip, to tell stories about people that are unflattering. And I've said it before, but there's that particular Catholic form of gossip where we'll kind of spread stories about people that are not so flattering, but at the end we'll say, I'm just telling you this so you can pray for them. So we have kind of a reason for doing that. But gossip, of course, is kind of acting in a similar way to the people in the gospel here today. We focus on the negative qualities of people, and we can spread these stories around. We can fall into that trap by ignoring the name of the person and just calling them by their sins. In order to be merciful, Jesus shows us really an important lesson. When we recognize our own need for mercy, our own need for forgiveness, then it's easier to be merciful for others. When we recognize that every one of us fall, we all sin, we're all forgiven by God and forgiven and accepted by others. When we recognize this free gift of mercy that we each receive, then it can be easier to be merciful with those around us. So we enter then further into Lent and closer to Holy Week. We focus on this great mercy of God. And we'll be having opportunities coming up to celebrate the sacrament of confession, of reconciliation, to accept this mercy. But let us then follow the teaching of Jesus to be merciful with those around us, recalling the great mercy that God has shown us. Let us imitate then Jesus, who knows the sins of all of us certainly, but calls each and every one of us by our name because he loves us.